Hello and welcome to the Edtech podcast. I'm Sophie Bailey. This week I took part in a what was UKTI but now known as Department for International Trade webinar on UK Edtech exporting opportunities. Speaking alongside the department and TeachPitch founder Aldo de Pape threw up some really interesting trends both in the UK and internationally, especially around China and the Gulf. For example, China spends more on education technology than the UK on education generally, and the UAE has the highest concentration of independent schools in the world. To find out more, check out the audio recording on the podcast feed, and I'll also be posting the full notes to the website and SlideShare page. Before we start, a quick shout out to this week's sponsor, EdSpace. If you haven't been down to EdSpace before in Hackney, definitely go and check them out, and no doubt you'll bump into many of the EdTech startups and scale-ups you're familiar with. This week, I'm also excited to announce a new partnership with Education Technology magazine and University Business magazine. Education Technology magazine distribute their news to over 30,000 educators, and I'm delighted to be working with them to get the podcast out to even more innovators among schools and universities. This week on the EdTech podcast, we have Charles Hardy, Education Lead from LinkedIn. Recorded at this year's EdTech Europe, this snappy podcast covers everything from the skills employees are looking for in students, a LinkedIn pilot project with Greater Manchester endorsed by then Cabinet Office Minister and Paymaster General Matthew Hancock, what it's like to have a LinkedIn profile when you work at LinkedIn, and what Microsoft's intention to buy LinkedIn means for education. As always, let me know what you think of the podcast at Podcast EdTech on Twitter or via the Facebook or Instagram page. You can always rate and review on iTunes as well, and have a great week, everyone. Great, so I'm sat here at EdTech Europe with Charles Hardy, who is an education evangelist at LinkedIn. So Charles, you spoke earlier today. Could you tell us a little bit about what you were talking about here on your panel earlier?
Yeah, sure. We were talking about online learning and skills development and how to bridge the skills gap, and how technology was an enabler, but maybe not 100% a silver bullet for everything. That it was enabling reach and changing the whole landscape. But there were certain things that need to be taken into consideration beyond that, such as the softer side of skills, and what employers are looking for is not necessarily all wrapped up into a profile and badging and certification for certain skills.
Yep, so I think I saw a tweet of yours which was, tipping your hat at skills like grit and resilience. And
yes.
You know, you could have a fantastic CV online, but if you can't connect with people one-to-one outside of your bedroom or your office, then that's not that much good.
Yeah, exactly right. I think employers are looking for, particularly the audience I deal with, students and young people entering the workforce for the first time. Employers are not actually looking for them to know everything or have all the skills lined up for these jobs. They're looking for more potential of people who are going to come in with the right approach and the competencies. And I'm very interested myself in the strengths and how you develop certain strengths. And you mentioned there, grit, determination. These are the things that make people successful. Being tenacious. What I talk to students and people a lot about is also enthusiasm, demonstrating passion, enthusiasm, an interest in a career path can take you a long way in an interview versus necessarily your educational qualifications, which in many ways no longer are providing the level of discernment that employers are looking for.
That's really interesting, because I actually took part in a Twitter chat yesterday, which was with Future Learn, and they're working with schools on, exactly that. So, if you can show, if you're trying to apply for a really competitive degree in a particular field of science or that kind of thing, or psychology, and if you can demonstrate that you've perhaps undertaken a MOOC course in that area, in a way that can demonstrate, or on lynda.com, that could demonstrate your passion for that and sort of stand you out against other people potentially?
Yeah, very much so. I work with students and career counselors, advisors on how to make yourself look employable and pitch yourself and build a good profile on LinkedIn, of course. And it's not necessarily just about putting in the hard facts of what you have achieved, that you have a certain qualification or a degree, that you have got some work experience or an internship. These are all good things, they're the meat of it. But what you're also trying to convey is an interest in that career. How do you demonstrate that you're reading around the subject, that you're engaged with the subject area? And that could be something, it could be through having certifications. It could be through sharing content. You're sharing news and information to your network, and that you're plugged into the right places, that you're following the right companies and organizations, which people can see on your profile, that you're not just saying you're interested in a career in finance, that you're saying, yes, I've explored risk assessment and getting down
becoming
into
an expert in that area.
Well, but not necessarily even becoming an expert, to be honest. It's just demonstrating that you're thinking about it and how some of your activities are bringing that to life. Not just saying, I'm interested, but how do you go beyond that and start to bring that to life?
And just to go right back to the beginning, because I wasn't actually aware that your role within LinkedIn existed. So it was really interesting, and I found it really interesting when I saw that you were speaking here. And if you were to describe what it is you do, how would you do that?
Yeah, and that's a good question, actually, because I have sort of different hats on different days.
Okay.
But essentially, my role is all around helping students and young people get on LinkedIn and see the value of it.
Yeah.
We've come quite a long way in the last 3 years. That if you went back 3 years' time and you asked young people about LinkedIn, they would either say, I don't know what LinkedIn is, or it'd be Facebook for old people. It's what you join when you've been in work for a few years.
And when we're saying young people, what age bracket is that?
Well, again, my focus at the moment has been predominantly on university and higher ed.
Yeah.
But more and more we're trying to showcase how we're relevant to school leavers in that 16 to 18 age bracket, that not expecting them to have an amazing LinkedIn profile or even a network of 1,000 people, what we're seeing, but we have a lot of data and insight on different career paths. So you can see through LinkedIn, how did people get to certain jobs? Or if you study this, where could that lead? So, with over 400 million members, we just have this, I know it's a cliche, big data, and it's trying to make that information accessible to people who are just starting out in their careers, to help them make more informed decisions, to sort of open eyes to maybe possible career paths they hadn't considered. If you study history, do you have to be a history teacher? No, actually, there's just a whole load of range of careers that people go into with different qualifications.
And do you partner with any organisations, so for example, the Skills Agency or the National Apprenticeship Service and things like that, in terms of what they're trying to do with the skills gap and perhaps sort of plugging into some of those things?
We're starting to have those conversations. I think it's how do we leverage our data to help those kind of bodies help other people, and it's very much just starting off, and working with employers as well that start to bring credibility to the data, because they're encouraging their employees help their brand, but they also help their employees individually, and it helps the bigger picture of what we're doing. So for example, we did a big pilot project with Manchester last year, where we worked with local government, local employers, local education institutions, universities, and looking to study the skills and the roles and the opportunities in the region where they were losing people. Maybe if, people from Manchester studied in Newcastle, did they come back to Manchester after they had graduated? People who came to Manchester to study, did they stay? So was that particular patterns? And then working with those key employers on what were the main the main recruiters and hirers and employers, what are the key skills and where do they see that going? So we published that at the start of this year, and it's a good demonstration of looking to work with a range of people and bring that together, but also leverage our data more and more for insights into a community or into a career sector to help take that forward.
And if people want to see that information, where can they find that?
If you search online for LinkedIn and Project Manchester, you'll find some information there. In terms of understanding a good illustration of the data we can provide, I'd recommend looking at a university on LinkedIn. So we're sat here in North London. If you looked up UCL, or London Metropolitan, you could see the data is available to anyone on LinkedIn to explore the career paths of all the graduates on LinkedIn who studied at those institutes. And often it's around hundreds of thousands of people on LinkedIn who studied at some of these universities. You can filter down and say, right, I just want to see the people who studied computing. Where are they working? Or history, as I mentioned. Where are they working now? What are the skills they have? That could be to give you ideas around career options, or it could be to find people who might be able to help you. So we're very much around getting people, in the Kevin Spacey quotation, send the elevator back down to the next generation. How can they help? And mentoring through that. So can you find connections with people who've gone down a career path, and particularly those warm connections of people who studied at your university or course?
Which has been going on for years. So now it's just like, I suppose, expediting that process of connecting with people who have similarities to you and are more willing to share because of alumni, things like this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, none of this is really new stuff theoretically. We're just an enabler, really.
Yeah.
It's, presenting yourself effectively, a LinkedIn profile, it's not new. Networking is not new.
Yeah.
A lot of these ideas are just back to where we started, technology as an enabler to make them easier and more accessible.
So I have a question, which is, if you work at LinkedIn, is there a lot of pressure to have an amazing LinkedIn profile?
There certainly is at the start. LinkedIn hires through LinkedIn, and you would probably be a bit of a fool if you were applying to work there and you hadn't polished off your profile. I think as you move through, there's lots of things to inspire you to continue to evolve, and I guess a deeper understanding of what we're trying to do internally and what it all means. But it's not as if there's a profile police coming around to your desk every day and tapping you on the knuckles if you haven't done an update.
That's reassuring to know.
I think in some ways, actually, we're as guilty as the next person of not continually refreshing and evolving a profile. I think it's very easy for people to think, okay, LinkedIn, every 3 years I'm going for a new job, I'm going to top up my profile. What we're looking for are people to engage with it on almost a daily basis or a weekly basis. And one of the biggest developments on LinkedIn has been our content platform, and how through following organizations and employers and your own network, that your news feed is custom to you around whatever your particular specialism or career or interests are, that you've focused on that. And then with the mobile, and we've had our mobile moment. Over 50% of our users now are using mobile devices to access LinkedIn on a regular basis. Having that content that's provided to you, that it's not just about getting a new job, that it's content and insight and discussion that's going to help you in your job, be more productive, be more successful, develop.
So a few things, I suppose, just thinking about your role in education. I'm not sure if you'll have the data on this, but I know that, for example, platforms like Pinterest and Facebook are really popular with teachers, and sometimes teachers aren't always on LinkedIn. Perhaps the senior leadership team would be more so. And then again, here we've had a lot of talk about how Edtech investment is really flourishing in China, and then they have their own network. So how do you deal with those challenges of, if a student looks to a teacher for advice, but they're not so familiar with that platform? So are you also having to kind of educate, I suppose, educators to get on board?
Yeah, very much so. Those influencers that young will look to get advice on careers and what to do next. And it's a good point on the teachers. They're not the strongest demographic on LinkedIn yet, but certainly they're very, very important for us, not just for that community and the value we can bring to that community in itself, and sharing information and resources and knowledge and opportunities, but also the role they have in helping the next generation coming through, and the value of what LinkedIn brings to their employability, to research, to how they present themselves in a professional context. So, yeah, I mean, definitely we're looking to grow that community on LinkedIn and help them understand, what LinkedIn can bring to them as individuals, to schools, and to the pupils they work with. It's really, really important. I mean, you referenced also China, and I guess as a bigger perspective on different countries and different platforms and things like that. Well, China is our fastest growing country at the moment. Yeah. We've been on the ground there for a couple of years. Lots of specific localization and partnerships within the country to look to drive that growth forward. And it brings unique challenges on what we're doing. So that exists in every country. As we're looking to bring economic opportunity to all our members and to all the workforce globally, we continue to push that forward, and you'll see more localization in country as we adapt what we're doing to that cultural niche or what they need.
And are you seeing the user age drop as you encourage, say, 16 to 18-year-olds onto LinkedIn?
Very early days on the 16 to 18 group. I think in certain countries, that's probably more progressive than others. As I said earlier, I think it comes back. Last 3 years, we've been very focused on higher ed. And, if we have approximately 50 million students, recent grads on LinkedIn. So that's where a huge growth has gone, fastest growing demographic group that we have. Okay. So I like to see it as in the next step as we continue to move that earlier. But it's going to take time because, we need the teachers on board. We need those influencers. But as we grow that, and as we've grown the data that's now available based on that student body, and if you think of a high proportion of the number of students leaving university are now on LinkedIn and continue to update their careers, the data we have gets richer and richer. So that helps, all the way through, whether that helps employers, whether that helps universities understand the career paths and employability of their graduates, whether that helps 16 to 18-year-olds see where are people going and what are they going on to do.
So when you go into schools or higher education institutions, who do you connect with there? So people listening, I mean, is that...
All sorts of people. So a kind of priority, the starting point is the careers service.
Okay,
and making sure that they're tooled up, comfortable and empowered to run LinkedIn clinics and one-to-ones with their students. And they see the value for the institution as well as the individuals. So, but certainly the careers consultants, advisors is a core part of it. But actually when I'm talking to universities, I like to bring a lot of stakeholders together because they're often working in silo.
Yeah.
There's alumni relations, there's their comms, digital social media people who own their online branding, who are talking a lot about attracting students.
And retaining them as well, because that's a big problem at the moment, especially in the first term, just, with dropouts and...
Yeah, no, that certainly is a consideration. And when you throw in fees and things like that, the weight of that. So there's lots of different ways that we're now touching on educational institutions in terms of their, the data we have has become part of their brand in terms of understanding, well, where do all the people go who studied at these universities? And I think that's a bit of an evolution too, that their employees are part of their brand. So having LinkedIn profiles for their professors and their lecturers, that will help them attract PhD students, that will help them attract funding, that can help. And if they're also publishing, content around their research or what are they doing, whether it's for universities, whether it's for any institution, people have a much bigger reach socially. And so having your employees or even your alumni, if you've got 100,000 alumni on LinkedIn, like a university like UCL, how do you leverage that as part of your branding is huge.
So through things like groups or...
Well, yeah, I mean, there's groups for discussion forums and things like that. But actually, having run a conference recently for universities that bought some of these stakeholders together, from careers working with current students, with alumni working with past students, from comms and marketing working with prospective bringing students in. One of the big things is content and how to engage these different audiences. And I think starting to think much more deeply about how they overlap, how they have a proper content and social media strategy of what they want to accomplish for all these different audiences, and how alumni can help you hire someone into the university, or how through that community you want to bring awareness to different career. So whatever career that could be, if you probably have some alumni who work in it, who are employed and have gone through, can you bring them back through a group? Can you connect them into current students or into a faculty? The connection with the lecturer and the teachers as well. The more that you can embed that early, so take the graduating cohort of 2016. They have a LinkedIn profile. They understand the value to their own personal employability, but also their connection to their institution, because their connection is for life, not just the 3 years they study there. And they're also connected to their lecturer as they leave. 5 years later, the lecturer has each graduating cohort, and they're out working at diverse career paths and employers, but those connections are still there. And it's very easy to see where people have gone, but also to bring them back and start bringing that knowledge, experience, relatable to the current students, because these people have been through the same experience.
Might have some interesting data on the gender pay gap, I'm thinking. Quite an interesting one, especially in leadership in schools at the moment as well. Gender
pay gap, I mean, there's lots of different things to explore. And actually, from a LinkedIn perspective, we tend not to be so strong on the gender thing. We don't ask for these kind of demographics of our members. So we don't ask them to input their gender or ethnicity or things like that. Yeah. So actually, you've picked on one we're not.
Yeah.
Necessarily putting forward
I suppose you could do a crude analysis
on
through names
that kind
of
and
thing.
Things like that.
But yeah, I mean, I think just in terms of targets and government moving towards transparency around some of these things, it's obviously quite interesting to some organisations to get a kind of picture or an industry picture on that.
Well, transparency is a good word as well. I mean, that's part of what we're trying to bring, is transparency of career path and the skills that you need, how you can develop those, what you need to move forward if you want to work in a particular job, particular career. So
I just had a thought. So obviously this week, and I'm not sure how much or not you can say about this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So obviously LinkedIn, it looks to be acquired for $26.2 billion by Microsoft. Microsoft has a massive mission on education. How will that affect what your mission is here with LinkedIn?
So yes, there was the announcement of the intent to buy this week, and even with smooth sailing, that would take all year to process. At the moment, I mean, this is 3 days old, the announcement. There's been no exploration at all, so I'm afraid I can't really talk about that other than saying exciting potential opportunities.
Okay, we'll keep our eyes on that one. What else are you going to do here today?
I mean, I work for LinkedIn, so I'm going to say there's some networking involved and a few meetings set up. I think the challenge with conferences like this is trying to balance the amazing level of content and concurrent tracks and presentations with trying to meet people and dissect all of that. It is quite a challenge. Just trying to get as much as I can out of today.
Charles, thank you very much for today.
No, pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
That's all for now, folks. Next week we have South by Southwest Edu exec producer Ron Reed on the show. I know many of you will be thinking about your own panel submissions via Panel Picker, so make sure you tune in. Thanks for listening, everyone.